channel. I appreciate you tuning in for another brand new review. What do we have in store for you here tonight? Well, we've been doing coverage of Season 2 of the AMC Immortal Universe show, Mayfair Witches, and it's time now to get to another episode. So tonight, we are talking Episode 3, Cover the Mirrors. Now, you might remember that it's been hinted at for a little while now that we'd finally get some interconnectivity between Mayfair Witches and the other Immortal Universe show, Interview with the Vampire. We get to see Lasher out and about in New Orleans, just kind of going around and potentially looking for a new victim. We know he's confused right now. He's hunting other Mayfair women, but he's still trying to figure out what he is and what his purpose is as well. And this brings him into contact with a vampire named Felix, who we find out, or it's at least implied, that he is a fledgling of Lestat. And he knows that Lasher is not a human, but he doesn't know specifically what Lasher is. And that means nobody's really aware of what Lasher actually is here, but he gives Lasher advice that follow those instincts, you won't drive yourself crazy, and you'll figure it out in the long run. And this leads Lasher to looking back and remembering some of his life prior to him becoming this demonic force that he is, and he's under the impression that he was a priest at one time. Now that's very interesting because in Season 1 we saw a lot of flashbacks to where the connection with the Mayfairs first started hundreds of years ago, and I think at least my idea was that that's where Lasher came from. Lasher's just from hell, and that's the end of the story, but it turns out there might be more here to Lasher than what we were thinking in the first place. So he at least has a little bit of information. I imagine these flashbacks of his are going to become more frequent and more intense, and that's where we're really going to get the backstory of who Lasher truly is. Now, on the other side of the world, we know that Cortland and Rowan's party to gather all the other Mayfairs together to put them under some kind of protection spell so Lasher can't kill them is underway. The party's going down here in this episode. Cortland's managed to gather the majority of the Mayfairs here, but he's warned Rowan that she can't really tell them that Lasher is going around killing Mayfair women because the Mayfairs have been connected to Lasher for so long at this point, and they're expecting all these great gifts and good fortune to come upon them for basically making sure this prophecy came true. But as we've seen so far, the only thing that Lasher seems to be bringing is more power for Rowan, and for everybody else, especially if you're a Mayfair woman, it's death and destruction. So this prophecy isn't exactly being fulfilled, but when you grow up like that, you're an acolyte, you're a true believer, and Cortland knows that regardless of the fact what side he might be trying to play, because there's no reason for us to think that Cortland is suddenly altruistic. Like, we know he wants to escape his father for whatever reason, who was in this dimension he was stuck in a thrall, but we're not entirely sure if he's fully aligned with Rowan in this case. So obviously, we knew that at a certain point it was going to end up coming out, him trying some treachery, and it definitely does happen, as eventually we see that he is kind of like undermining what Rowan has to say when Rowan does eventually confess to all the other Mayfairs that Lasher is going around and killing some of them. Cortland's very quick to chime in that there's no way that this could be true, and basically turning the suspicion away from Lasher and directing it back again to Rowan. We don't know what the end game here is because Cortland's very aware that Rowan is more powerful than he is right now, and he doesn't have Lasher to count on to pull his ass out of any of these tight situations he might be in. So I'm very curious to see how Cortland's going to keep this treachery up and it doesn't come back to bite him in the ass, because he's dealing with Rowan, he's dealing with Lasher, and as we see, he's still dealing with his father as well too. You know, there's a part here in this episode where he's talking to Dolly Jean, and they're talking about getting dressed for the party, and he wants to go home and get something for himself, but they say there's no time, and Dolly Jean tells him just grab something of his father's. And we know the trepidation there, especially given the first, given like what we've seen from this season so far, that in the stone prison he was trapped in, he was dealing with some kind of form of his father, to where he's literally feeding pieces of himself to him as he's coming down on him, like the entire time that he's there. This also makes us wonder where do JoJo's loyalties lie, because what we've seen over this season and the second half of the first season was that JoJo was trying to be very, very helpful to Rowan, and she's warned Rowan multiple times about like reviving Cortland and bringing him into the fray because Cortland is treacherous and is only looking out for himself, and that he's inevitably going to betray Rowan if she brings him out of this prison. But we also hear a bit of a secret conversation going on between JoJo and Cortland that does bring up the question of JoJo's loyalty, including the fact that it sounds like magic was utilized to help JoJo transition. That, like, because JoJo points out the fact that the Mayfair women are much more powerful than the men. So, of course, Cortland was on board with having a daughter, and that somehow played into magic that was utilized for JoJo. And I have to imagine here that now that we have this information, this is going to bring JoJo into conflict with Rowan as well, too, because who knows if whatever magics or spells was used to help her out is something that can be reversed by Rowan going through what she has planned out for Lasher. So who knows the way that's going to end up working out. This party ended up being a complete disaster. Some of the Mayfairs don't even show. And at the end of it, Rowan ends up putting JoJo and Daphne, who is Moira's sister, the mind reader, into a thrall. They disappear by the end of this party because she's looking to stop them and doesn't know any better way to do it. So an absolute unmitigated disaster happening at this Mayfair party, which we kind of knew was going to happen in the first place. Meanwhile, the Talamasca are trying to get all of their fronts together at this point, as we don't really know if we're trusting Sip yet or not. We know that Sip has assisted them, but at the same time, Sip's not really in their plans for what they have for Rowan or for Lasher, and they just need to use him for those connections. Now, Sip has that relationship forming with Moira to where there's that bit of trust due to the truth spell that he used on her in the previous episode here, but it's not genuine. So even though she's calling Sip up for help and keeping him in the loop of the Mayfair party that's going on, and that Lasher isn't there but could eventually be there, that doesn't change the fact that Sip is still seeming very much on the outside looking in from all fronts. He's going to be forced to pick a side, and there's going to be a question of what he's going to be willing to do with these powers he has to help out whoever he ultimately sides with. So I'm curious to see where we'll see his loyalties fall to as the season keeps on going on. Other information we found out as Lasher continues to hunt down Mayfair women, he hunts down Dolly Jean's sister Evelyn at the bar that she runs. And this ends up not going as successful for him as it's happened in previous attempts. In previous attempts, Lasher very much approached these women from a softer standpoint of connecting with them, some kind of, sexual tryst, basically. And that's not really what's happening with Evelyn. And Evelyn is kind of wise enough to this and not really aware maybe of who Lasher is or the importance he's supposed to have. So when Lasher ends up attacking her, thankfully, her and her son are able to fend him off, and she's able to keep alive. And that's very significant because the encounters we've seen Lasher have so far with Mayfair women just haven't ended well for them. And that includes the very first encounter we saw in the season premiere, where we find out in this episode that girl obviously was a Mayfair woman. We didn't get a lot of information about her, and we kind of just left her off to the side as we've been moving on. But as we circle back, we find out at this party that the girl's name was Lucy and that she was a Mayfair as well. So Lasher, unfortunately, is just affecting everybody in this story so far, and nobody seemingly has any answers for what Lasher's involvement ultimately means. Now, we know that Moira is trying to get Rowan to kill Lasher, and Rowan is still in a place to where, she knows that that's what needs to happen in order to protect the other Mayfairs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she's so willingly and easily able to do it, because as we see at the end of this episode, as the Talamasca arrive to capture her with the help of Sip, she ends up taking the fall, and while she's knocked out, Lasher is taken away by the Talamasca. So there's a lot of doors being opened up in this episode and a lot more conflict being built. I'm very curious to see if we're going to see more of the inner workings of the Talamasca now with Lasher there. And assumedly, this is going to lead to either Sip having to help with some kind of breakout mission, or Rowan deciding that she has to find the Talamasca building and assault it in order to get Lasher out. But I don't think Lasher's staying long with the Talamasca at all. But I'm curious, y'all tell me in the comment section what you think is coming, especially if you haven't read these books. I'm curious to where you think the season is going off with this. Don't forget though, Lark is now in New Orleans as well too, and he's still trying to catch some time with Rowan. It's very clear the romantic feelings are still there, and he's not necessarily directly involved in this this yet, but I can't even begin to imagine the world of surprise he's going to have when he starts dealing with everything that's here in New Orleans and in the Mayfair world. That's it for tonight, though, y'all. Mayfair Witches still continues to be so exciting. Tell me your thoughts there in the comment section from wherever you're watching this. And of course, hit that subscribe button because I got more great reviews coming your way, folks. Best way to stay subscribed is to access my link tree, which you can do at linktr.ee/T-Scary-Movie. If you get subscribed, that's going to be access to the YouTube page for video versions of the show, your favorite podcasting platforms for audio-only versions of the show, to my Letterboxd page for written reviews and movie rankings throughout the year, to my TikTok page for short horror content, including movie news, movie premieres, and full episodes, to my Twitch page for horror gaming, including The Thing Remastered and Phasmophobia, and to my Fangoria shop page where you can enjoy a 20% discount off anything in the Fangoria shop. Hit that subscribe button, folks. I got reviews for Companion coming your way here soon. More of Dexter Original Sin. We got a lot more on the plate here for you very soon. Hard Eyes is coming up as well, too. Y'all don't want you to miss anything at all. But that's it tonight. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.